The House Beneath the Mountains. Part 1. The Voice Across the River. The first howl came while the sun was still above the mountains. Vilpa stood ankle-deep in the river, rinsing red clay from a newly fired water jar. The afternoon current moved around her legs, cool and clear, carrying white flower petals from the northern marshes. Behind her, the village of Kharra climbed the hillside in uneven rings. From the river, Kharra looked as though it had grown directly from the earth. Its round lodges were built from reddish clay, riverstone, and dark cedar beams. Most were painted with bands of deep blue, bone white, and burnt orange. Families marked their doors with symbols of their houses: a hand, a fish, a crooked spear, a bird with its wings spread. Bright woven cloth hung from the flat roofs. Copper plates caught the sunlight. Small bells made from shells and hollow animal bones chimed whenever the wind passed between the lodges. The highest structure belonged to Chief Brukovan. Its walls were painted black from the ground to the height of a man's knee, then white above it. A row of antlers lined the roof. Below the chief's lodge stood the fire circle, the grain house, the healer's shelter, and the long wooden racks, where strips of meat dried beneath red cloth. Children ran along the narrow paths between buildings. Women beat blankets against smooth stones. Hunters repaired arrows beneath a canopy dyed with berry juice until the cloth had become a dark purple. Vilpa had known every path, every painted doorway, and every loose stone since childhood. The land beyond the river was different. No one from Kharra built there. The trees on the opposite bank grew close together, their trunks pale beneath strips of peeling bark. Even during the day, the spaces between them remained dark. Branches twisted around one another so tightly that very little sky could be seen through them. The elders called that region the Crooked Wood. They had other names for the mountains behind it, though those names were spoken only during burial rites. Vilpa lifted the jar from the water and inspected its painted rim. Her grandmother had decorated it with black triangles and small yellow circles. Vilpa thought the pattern made it look too ceremonial for carrying water, but Shavri insisted that useful things deserved beauty as much as sacred ones. A sound rolled down from the mountain. It began low enough to be mistaken for distant thunder. Then it rose, bending into a long cry that seemed too deep for a wolf and too controlled for any ordinary animal. Vilpa stopped. Across the river, a flock of black birds erupted from the trees. They circled once, then fled eastward. The women washing clothes farther downstream gathered their baskets. A fisherman dragged his small reed boat onto the bank without collecting his nets. No one had to be told what the sound meant. The sun had not set, yet Kharra was already being called indoors. A second cry answered from somewhere inside the Crooked Wood. It was closer. Vilpa climbed out of the river. She dried her feet against the back of her skirt, lifted the jar to her hip, and started up the path. Vilpa. She stopped. The voice came from across the river. A woman stood between two pale trees. The distance made her face difficult to see, but Vilpa recognized the long grey dress and the bright beads woven through her hair. Shavri, the woman stepped nearer to the river. Come help me. Vilpa glanced back at the village. Her grandmother should have been inside their lodge preparing the evening meal. Shavri rarely crossed the river, and she would never enter the Crooked Wood alone. The woman lifted one hand. Her arm seemed too long. Vilpa narrowed her eyes. The figure's fingers were hidden beneath strands of grey cloth, or perhaps fur. Its shoulders rose and fell as it breathed. Come here, child, it said. The voice sounded exactly like Shavri's, including the small rasp she carried from an illness 3 winters ago. Yet the mouth did not move with the words. Vilpa stepped backward. The figure tilted its head. Something pale hung loosely from one side of its face. Vilpa. The voice changed. It belonged to a young man now. Vilpa, wait for me. Her stomach tightened. That was Othun's voice. Othun had drowned in the spring flood when Vilpa was 13. She had watched the men pull his body from beneath a fallen tree. The figure stepped into the remaining sunlight. It was taller than any man in Kharra. A black hide hung from its shoulders, though Vilpa could not determine where the hide ended and the creature began. Its legs bent strangely beneath it. Patches of pale skin showed through the dark covering along its chest and abdomen. A narrow muzzle pushed outward from a face that still carried traces of human features. A strip of flesh hung from its left cheek like a poorly fitted mask. Its yellow eyes settled upon her. The water jar slipped from Vilpa's hands and shattered against the stones. The creature dropped onto all fours. Vilpa ran. It entered the river behind her. Water erupted beneath its weight. Vilpa climbed the steep path toward Kharra. Sharp grass cut her ankles. The beads at the ends of her braids struck against her cheeks as she ran. Warning drums began beating from the watch platform. 3 slow strikes. A pause. 3 more. People disappeared into their lodges. Warriors pulled long spears from the racks beside the gate. Mothers snatched children from the paths, while older boys carried baskets of burning coals toward the barricade. Vilpa looked over her shoulder. Nothing followed her up the path. The river was empty. For an instant, she wondered if the creature had returned to the trees. Then she saw movement beneath the water. A dark shape traveled against the current without rising to breathe. Vilpa reached the gate. 2 warriors pulled her through and slammed the cedar doors behind her. Thick wooden bars were lowered into place. Others piled thorn branches along the base of the wall and soaked them with oil. "Did it touch you?" one of the warriors asked. "No." "Did it speak?" Vilpa hesitated. The warrior grabbed her shoulders. White paint covered the upper half of his face, making his frightened eyes appear even wider. "What voice did it use?" Vilpa pulled away from him. She hurried through the village, passing lodges whose colourful doors were being sealed from within. The evening cooking fires had been extinguished. Smoke drifted low over the rooftops, carrying the smells of cedar, roasted grain, and hot clay. Small protective bundles hung above nearly every entrance. They were made from red thread, dried thorns, and pieces of mirrored copper. Vilpa had seen them all her life. Until that evening, she had never wondered what they were meant to keep out. She found Shavri standing outside their lodge. Her grandmother was a narrow woman with silver hair twisted into a knot high on her head. She wore a dark blue robe with rows of tiny white shells sewn around the sleeves. A bone-handled knife rested in her right hand. Shavri looked past Vilpa toward the gate. "You saw it." Vilpa stopped in front of her. "It used your voice." Shavri's expression did not change. "Then it remembers me." "What remembers you?" Inside, their lodge was warmer than the others because Shavri kept a small fire burning in a clay basin at its center. Bundles of dried plants hung from the cedar roof beams. Woven rugs covered the floor in patterns of rust, cream, and black. Along one wall stood painted jars containing grain, salt, medicine, and pigments. Shavri closed the door and lowered a heavy curtain over it. She crossed the room, pulled aside her sleeping mat, and dug her fingers into the packed earth floor. A flat stone came loose. Beneath it rested a wooden chest that Vilpa had never seen. Shavri opened it. Inside lay a necklace made from dark teeth. Most was small and smooth. The center fang was as long as Vilpa's finger and carved with lines that resembled claw marks. A faded strip of green cloth had been folded beneath it. Vilpa recognized the fabric. Her mother wore that same green cloth in the only painting Shavri had ever shown her. "Why do you have this?" Shavri tied the necklace around Vilpa's throat. "Your mother left it for you." "You said nothing of hers survived." "I hoped you would never need it." Outside, something struck the village gate. Dust fell from the roof beams. A second impact cracked one of the supporting posts. Warriors shouted. Arrows hissed through the air, followed by the sharp cries of wounded men. Vilpa touched the carved fang resting against her chest. "Who was my mother?" Shavri took a small pouch from the hidden chest. Black powder lined its opening. Her name was Kharra. She came down from the mountain 18 years ago, carrying you beneath her heart. I know that much. You know the story we gave you. The gate shook again. Shavri scattered black powder across the doorway and windows. It smelled of burned hair and bitter roots. The true story began before you were born. A section of the outer wall collapsed. People screamed. Heavy bodies landed among the lodges. Claws scraped across the painted walls. The bone bells above the rooftops began ringing wildly, although the evening wind had stopped. Vilpa moved toward the door. Shavri caught her arm. You must reach the eastern caves. What about you? I will follow. The curtains suddenly lifted inward. A long, dark hand slipped beneath the door. The fingers were almost human, though black claws curved from their tips. Shavri drove a knife through the hand. The thing outside shrieked in two voices at once. One sounded like an animal. The other belonged to a crying child. The hand withdrew. Shavri pushed Vilpa toward a small opening at the back of the lodge. Vilpa crawled through and emerged into an alley between two clay walls. The village had become a confusion of smoke and movement. A creature crouched upon the grain house. Its body carried the general shape of a huge wolf, though its front legs were long enough to hang over the roof's edge. Rope and painted cloth had been braided into the dark hair along its neck. Another moved upright between the lodges. A human face lay stretched across its narrow skull. The face belonged to a dead hunter Vilpa had known since childhood, but it hung too loosely around the jaw. Warriors drove it back with burning spears. The creature tore the face away and threw it at them. Beneath it was something Vilpa could not understand. She ran toward the eastern caves. Shavri climbed through the opening behind her, but a black shape dropped from the roof. It landed between them. White scars crossed its muzzle. One ear had been torn away. Bone charms hung from its braided mane, clicking together as it turned its head. Vilpa recognized the yellow eyes from the river. The creature rose onto its hind legs. Standing upright, it was taller than the entrance to Shavri's lodge. Sections of its body appeared wrapped in a second skin. Human lips were stretched around its muzzle, and a row of small teeth had been sewn into the flesh along its chest. "You have hidden her long enough," it said. The voice came from somewhere below the borrowed lips. Shavri threw burning powder into its face. The creature recoiled. Black smoke curled from its fur. Vilpa seized a fallen spear and drove it into the creature's side. The stone blade entered beneath its ribs. It looked down at the wound. Its blood was almost black. A low sound rose from its chest. Vilpa first mistook it for a growl. Then she realized it was laughing. "There you are." Its claw closed around her throat. The creature lifted Vilpa from the ground and pulled her close. Several different scents clung to it: wet fur, cold soil, old blood, and the sweet oil used during Kharra's burial ceremonies. It pressed its nose against her neck. "Kharra's blood," it whispered, hidden beneath ash and bitterroot. Vilpa tried to force the spear deeper. The creature did not seem to feel it. "The covered moon has opened." The necklace began to shake against Vilpa's chest. A crack ran through the carved fang. Black dust poured from its hollow center and rose toward her face, moving against the air. Vilpa could not turn away. The dust entered her mouth and nostrils. Her heart stopped. The creature released her. Vilpa struck the ground, but she felt no pain. For one suspended moment, the village became completely silent. Then sound returned with such force that she pressed her hands against her ears. She heard hundreds of heartbeats. She heard blood moving beneath skin. She heard worms twisting in the soil under the lodges. She heard an injured warrior breathing behind a wall 3 houses away. Shavri whispered her name. Vilpa looked towards the creature. The darkness no longer concealed it. She could see each muscle beneath its hide. She could smell the fear hidden beneath the blood coating its fur. The creature stepped back. Its yellow eyes widened. Vilpa looked down at her hands. Her fingernails had become black, curved points. When she raised her head, the village fire shone gold inside her eyes.